scenes, and Lydia, there is so much awkwardness as well. Like, when I think to the Dance of Netherfield Hall, and all the moments that happen in that, like, the mother is just fantastic in this adaptation. I actually think she makes it. I don't think anyone else can play that role as well as her. In my head, I think it was Alison Steadman, and she's just this kind of sort of slightly eccentric, intense, demanding, over-the-top character, and she's just fantastic. So yeah, I think that the characters and the actors were perfectly cast, and I loved all the small details, like I said, how faithful it was to the book, and I just don't think it can be beaten, really. I still watch it maybe like once every few years because it's still on, I think, BBC iPlayer. At least it kind of comes back and forth, whether it's on there. So yeah, just so many standout moments in that, and it's epic beyond belief, and it's just such a good, faithful, loving adaptation. So the second book that I want to talk about, or adaptation, I'm so used to saying book, the second film in this case I want to talk about is Howl's Moving Castle. Howl's Moving Castle. Now, I do not have the book anymore. It was something that I did own, but I didn't really love the book so much as the film. Whereas Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, they were equal in that sense. I think this film adaptation by Studio Ghibli is superior to the book by Diana Wynne Jones. So this is by the studio that has created other amazing anime movies like Spirited Away, and My Neighbor Totoro, and Kiki's Delivery Service, etc, etc. And I just love the kind of whimsical, magical element to these. They just become so fantastical, but again, they have some amazing characters and moments in it. So maybe what's going to be sort of interesting to think about is this is another adaptation that I saw before I read the book, and I do wonder if that has kind of a part to play in it, because you become attached to the adaptation first, rather than if you read the book first, maybe you're a little bit disappointed by what's missing or how they've portrayed certain events and characters. So yeah, this is, I haven't said what any like Pride and Prejudice is about. I feel like most people know, but yeah, Howl's Moving Castle is about a girl named Sophie who basically manages to piss off this wicked witch, the Witch of the Waste, who puts a curse on her so that her appearance changes from, I guess, like an 18-20-year-old to a much older woman with grey hair and wrinkles, kind of a stooped appearance as well, so she looks very old. So everyone obviously doesn't realise who she is anymore, and she kind of goes off on a bit of an adventure to seek out the wizard Howl. Howl, off the title, to try and get him to transform her back. But the plot twist, the issue is that she can't really tell anyone about this curse, so she can't tell him what she needs, and she ends up kind of staying with him, becoming his housekeeper, and the story just evolves from there. And episode you see there is the family that's lived there for a little while, and then there's this night of kind of terror where everything just goes wrong. The family has to flee, and then it's essentially a series of flashbacks and the modern day where all the kids have grown up and they're adults, and they come together, and it's like piecing the story of what happened that night and what's happened kind of to them in between, and like I say, how they deal with kind of trauma, and the family bonds as well. So yeah, very different, because in this, the main character Eleanor she gets invited to the house to essentially kind of spend some time there as like an experiment or something. But yeah, I just think it kind of took the idea and did take some of the themes and just expanded on it in an incredible way. And in terms of the series itself, I remember watching it when I went to stay at my sister's house. I was moving down to London and I had a job interview. I think I had a job interview like the next day or something. And we stayed up really late watching, because she was like, oh my god, this is an amazing series, let's watch it. And yeah, we watched loads of episodes that we shouldn't have done, and I think if you can keep you awake when you should be sleeping for a job interview, that's a really good sign. There are some moments in that TV series that I still think about, like 7 years later, 8 years later, whatever, and they give me chills. They give me absolute chills thinking about. You know, there's this whole thing with the bent neck lady, which is kind of what I'm talking about if you've seen it. The kind of understanding that you get throughout of what's kind of happening and some of the ghosts and stuff is, I just think, phenomenal. And some of the reveals at the end, I just places like Isengard, the massive tower, and Helm's Deep, and other monuments and places, and they would build exact replicas just to a miniature scale, and then they would have the camera kind of panning around and doing shots of it like that. So I think that essentially what that means is you can tell the level of detail they put into making this world, Middle Earth, come alive for us pays off so hard, because these are so immersive, incredible films. And again, obviously the acting I think is phenomenal, all of the casting. Again, it is an adaptation that has some lines and stuff coming directly from the books. I think there are things like the chapter title in the book, A Shortcut to Mushrooms, for example, is used as a line by one of the characters to kind of give like Easter eggs and stuff to people that know the books really well. And I think ultimately Peter Jackson, the director, was a humongous fan. Like, he loved The Lord of the Rings, the books, and so I think that he, you know, as a fan, wanted to make these incredible epic adventure movies. So he had the vested interest as someone that loved the books. So yeah, absolutely incredible. Is there anything else I wanted to say? Oh yeah, so you know, there were some elements that they changed a little bit as well, which was to try and increase the presence of women, because in the actual main books, there's like barely any women in them. So I know they did kind of transform those roles a little bit, and pull kind of from the appendix and take elements from the world lore and kind of flesh out those characters a little bit more. So Eowyn and Arwen, I believe, mainly, they kind of transformed their roles a little bit so that we had not just solely men all the time. But I just think these are incredible films, and again, I still would watch them. I think they're perfect for like a sleepy Sunday afternoon. I know them so well that I guess I can like multitask while they're on in the background. So good. Okay, so they were like my top adaptations. Moving into ones I still think are fantastic, but just maybe not quite as good. And we're gonna start off with The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby, and I am talking about the Baz Luhrmann, another Baz Luhrmann entry. It was a film, again, had Leonardo DiCaprio in it, and Carey Mulligan, maybe some other famous people. So yes, dual entries for Leo and Baz Luhrmann. But yeah, this is, I think, you know, quite a popular classic, and I just loved, kind of for similar reasons, the adaptation compared to Romeo and Juliet, because just the, you know, Baz Luhrmann's style of directing, again with all the kind of visuals, and being quite close to the book. I believe I think I did read The Great Gatsby first, I want to say, and then watched the film, but I think I read and watched so far apart that it's kind of hard for me to remember how close it is as an adaptation, but I think it did a very good job of sticking to the book. And this follows the story of a guy, I can't remember his name. He's actually, played by Tobey Maguire in the film, I think, is the actor. Anyway, he is kind of the main character who's narrating the events. So Jay Gatsby is not really the main character, even though he sort of dominates the story. But yeah, essentially this character moves to the wealthy area. Is it Long Island? I think it might be Long Island or somewhere like that, or in like New York area. Anyway, and his neighbour is the reason, the shots and the way that's kind of incorporated into the visuals of the film brings out this like real kind of tension and like almost foreboding atmosphere at times. So yeah, I just think it was incredible. Leo, obviously, again, I think he's an incredible actor. So yeah, just a really fantastic adaptation. some nights, then in the performance, Benedict Cumberbatch would play the monster and Johnny Lee Miller would play Frankenstein. Whereas in other performances, it was reversed and Benedict Cumberbatch was Victor Frankenstein and Johnny Lee Miller was the monster. And I watched the Johnny Lee Miller as the monster version. I have seen clips of the reverse performances, and I feel like I made the right choice. I just thought the way they acted, or the way he in particular acted out as the monster, as this creature that, it's like, how much sympathy do we have? Because he was created in a kind of way that was essentially Frankenstein's like hubris and errors, and he's kind of doing this wrong thing, has created a living being, and I guess the whole point is he to be punished for existing, or can he better himself? Is he worthy of our sympathy and empathy? And I think ultimately, like, this made you feel so much for the creature and the monster, but also you saw his dark side so well, and the kind of conflict within him. So yeah, just an absolutely fantastic performance. And I do think, it just kind of reminds us that going to see plays, of things that aren't necessarily meant to be, that can be adapted, they can be absolutely fantastic. And maybe kind of, a film version of Frankenstein maybe would be like very over the top. Obviously on stage they just have to be really clever about settings, and it makes you focus in maybe on the characters more, which I think for Frankenstein works very, very well. So yeah, just had to include that because it's still something that I think about, the whole experience of it, but how fantastically it was staged and acted as well. By my reckoning, we should be down to our last two now. So I'm gonna go with one that I don't have either a book or any kind of media to show you, and that is Twilight, which I feel like is quite different to most of the other films and stuff that I've talked about. But yeah, Twilight is, I just think it's a great adaptation, probably because I don't really love the books. Like, I think they're fine for, teenagers or whatever. But yeah, I never had this real love for that book series that I know a lot of my peers would have done, a lot of my friends did. I connected way more with things like Harry Potter when I was growing up. And yeah, I guess I was a bit snobby about Twilight to a certain extent. But I just think because I didn't really have this foundational love for the books that much, resonated a lot more, and was just a really amazing kind of old school adaptation that took some of the great things in this very very worthwhile and brilliant story, and yeah, elevated it compared to my experience of the book. And I resisted watching the more recent version because, yeah, in my head, you know, those characters, Joe is Winona Ryder and Amy is that actress. You know, I don't really want them to be replaced, and I don't see how they can be. I learned that the hard way with Pride and Prejudice when I've watched other adaptations. To me, I'm always just looking for the characters that I know, how they've come to life in that original adaptation that I knew and loved. So, yeah. So they were all of the 10 adaptations that I think are incredible. Like, many of them I would say are better than the books, if not just on a par with. So yeah, I just think they're fantastic. They're great examples of how you can do book adaptations really well. You know, like I say, the common theme is that a lot of them I saw the film or TV series first, so that probably does have an element of skew to it. And I think that if you've read a book and loved a book, your imagination has created that film for you, essentially. So if someone else makes that in a different way, then yeah, naturally you might be a bit disappointed. So that might be part of the reasoning, but I still think for many of those, even if you've read the book, I still think that these are incredible adaptations that most people would really love. And I think maybe if I had to choose one to recommend, it might be, like, universally, it might be the Romeo and Juliet by Baz Luhrmann, because it's just incredible, and it just, like I said earlier, shows how Shakespeare can be done in a way that's very true, very exact to the source material, but fits so well for a modern audience and is still so engaging and draws you in and makes you feel so much. So I love that. But yeah, I did put Pride and Prejudice first because that's the one that I will always forever go back to and watch, like, pretty much year after year. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video. I will definitely have missed out some that other people love. You know, part of that is because I haven't seen loads of films, like The Shining. I haven't seen The Shining, for example. And yeah, loads of books that I've loved that I haven't seen the adaptations, and vice versa. Like Wolf Hall, I just started watching Wolf Hall, which is the adaptation